fous, nous ne sommes pas ivres, nous sommes juste dans la joie. Une joie profonde, nos cœurs elles inondent. Cette joie, elle vient du ciel, non, nous ne sommes pas fous.
Well, hello, darling. Welcome back to Sing With Your Feet, the podcast in which we stop dreaming about living a satisfying life and start making a plan to make our life satisfying. The podcast in which we put on our nerd glasses and get geeky about one of the most complicated, most exciting, most exasperating subjects in the whole of human history, ourselves. The podcast in which we practice speaking kindly to ourselves, the way we would speak to someone we love, because, as they say, practice makes perfect. My name is Lily Fields, and I'm going to be your fairy godmother for the next half hour or so. Did you bring your magic wand today? Boy, oh boy. Your insistence on this falderall and fiddly-dee that you have no magic wand is becoming impossible, my dear. Now, Lily... that's you. In case you forgot, you sound like a lazily researched Southern belle. Stop dreaming about a satisfying life and start living a satisfying life. That's semantics. Words are words, and they just multiply like little white mice. And now I need to put my foot down on something, Lily Fields. Here you go, calling me exasperating again. I just will not stand for it. Do you hear me? And don't you even think of making me go back and look in that mirror again, Lily Fields. I told you last time, I just do not like that. Now listen, I love talking nuanced semantics. It's one of the benefits of being a fairy godmother with a magic wand, a microphone, and a philosopher princess locked in an ivory tower slumbering peacefully waiting for love's first kiss. Do not get me started. I can talk circles around you, literally and figuratively. That being said, I do want us to get a little geeky today about words. But so that you stay interested, we will get geeky about words that you choose. Words that make up the areas of your life that are the most important to you. Today, we're going to take those little rapidly multiplying white mice that you talked about, and we're going to turn them into 4 white horses. As for your second objection, I do believe that I heard you stamp your foot. It echoed all the way over here to me in France. Well, I intend to double down on what got your little Cinderella feet a-stompin'. You are exasperating, but I'll be darned if you aren't also one of the most fascinating people I've ever met. I wish you could see it as clearly as I do. I wish you knew just how intriguing it is for me to learn about why you do what you do, and particularly why you insist on doing things that make you miserable. You know, Albert Einstein is attributed with saying, "Insanity is doing the same things over and over and expecting different results." It's not me, Lily Fields, your fairy godmother, who says that. That's Albert flippin' Einstein. Well, somehow, this lovely orange petticoat of mine has the design flaw of having no pockets to protect. I will insist that you put on your nerd glasses with me and see if we can wake up the philosopher princess for a few minutes. Maybe she can talk some sense into you. And as for your third objection, that speaking to ourselves kindly is a waste of time, well, today we're going to talk about the concept of love languages, which is a neat, extremely helpful notion put forth by psychologist Gary Chapman about how we can find greater satisfaction in our relationships. I'm going to argue that while this is a game changer in how we experience our closest relationships, it can also have a revolutionary impact on how we deal with ourselves and our own shortcomings. And I really believe that it's a key to making a plan for a more satisfying life. I know you don't always believe me when I say this, but I believe in you. I believe that you have all the resources at your disposal to be satisfied. All I'm asking is that you just take my hand, a little fairy dust, and off we go. Back in episode 2, I assigned you a little thought experiment in which you wrote down the numbers 1 through 18 on a sheet of paper. And then, in one column, you wrote down a positive memory, and in a second column, you wrote down a negative memory. I've already told you this, and I will keep saying it. If you need competent mental health support, please go get it. This kind of activity can dislodge thoughts and feelings that you might need help combing through. Get professional help. Do you understand? Nod. Yes? Okay, very good. So let's look at some of the things that percolated for you. If you haven't done it yet, please take the time to do this thought experiment. It's as easy as bibbidi bobbidi boo. One good memory for each year of your life from age 1 to 18. It's actually not that easy. Believe me, I have done it, and it took me a lot of time to comb through my memories and pull out a single silvery thread for each year from that jumble that's up there in my mind. But let's go to the jeweler's together for a second, okay? You and me. The jeweler pulls out a black velvet mat. It's so dark black that you can hardly see any details on it. You can see even the specks of dust. It's so dark and black. Everything shows up on it. With a pair of tweezers, he carefully extracts something barely perceptible and he lays it down on the mat. It's one tiny silver thread. Then another one, and another one. And he lies them side by side until there are 18 little silver threads lined up like little soldiers. Under just the right light, those 18 little silver threads might just possibly look like sparkle. Each one of those little silvery threads represents something that has been in you since your youth. Faint little somethings that once brought you joy. And if you're willing to take this leap with me, might just lead us back to the bags of gold and diamonds in the rough that you buried in your backyard. These long forgotten treasures, even now, even after all these years, can still be cut and polished and turned into real, honest-to-goodness sparklers. They might not be the Hope Diamond, but little sparklers. The secret here is to tap into something that once brought you joy. Joy, after wisdom, which is something we discussed in episode 3, is one of our secret weapons in pursuing our ideal life. And, as the philosopher princess often says, you need more joy. Oh, did your eyes just glaze over? Yeah, she tends to make that happen. Just to tell you how very, very important I believe joy is, the music that you hear throughout this podcast, the title of the song is La Joie, which literally means joy. The words of the song, which are sung in French by my co-conspirator in many musical follies, Matt Kugler, say this: Nous ne sommes pas fous, nous ne sommes pas ivres, nous sommes juste dans la joie. It means we're not crazy, we're not drunk, we're just full of joy. You might say that this whole podcast, at its very essence, is tainted, punctuated, and bookended by joy. So yeah, when the philosopher princess finally wakes up from her slumber and she starts making your eyes glaze over with talk of virtue, be ready for her to have a few things to say about joy. For now, I want to give you a few ideas. I'm going to take a few examples from my thought experiment. I hope they're relatable for you. Obviously, your thought experiment will take you to a different place than mine did, but the process of unjumbling the silver threads will be similar. So number 1, the first, which was the easiest year for me to remember something good about, was when I was 7 years old. It was a few days before Christmas. I was standing in the wings at a little community theater on closing night of the first play I ever performed in. The cast was huddled, arms around each other's shoulders, singing Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. The joy I feel in remembering that moment is one that rhymes with connection and teamwork, with accomplishment and music. So were I to pull out a few threads of that jumble that might eventually be things that might make me sparkle again, I would write down connection, teamwork, accomplishment, music. So moving on to the second one. I was 9 years old, and I had been chosen to sing a solo in our music concert. We were singing a song in French. I remember my sister helping me learn how to pronounce the text phonetically. She even made a little recording of herself singing on it on a cassette tape so that I could learn it. It's interesting to note that I don't remember the actual performance, but I do remember practicing that text and that solo like my life depended on it. I have a very, very specific memory of standing in our front hall, a stack of mail in my hand, the cold air rushing through the mail slot as I rushed to slam it shut. I was singing the text, and my sister from the other side of the house corrected my pronunciation. I remember I had gotten a piece of mail, and I was holding it in my hand, practicing my French song. I had never been happier in all my life. I felt like the center of the universe. So what in there resembles a silvery thread? Music, specifically being a soloist, the French language, specifically speaking French, and most importantly, working on a project with my sister. The third memory I want to share with you from my thought experiment is when I was 16 years old. I had discovered that my TI-82 calculator, that was the big calculator when I was in high school. I just had a little surge of nostalgia for the days before smartphones. Where was I? Right, the TI-82 calculator. It had a text function in which I could pretend to be paying attention in Miss Rickson's math class, but actually be writing stories and satisfying my incessant need to be creating characters and universes and storylines. I went from dreading my geometry class to seeing it as a delightful little respite in my day where I could get lost in imaginary worlds. I remember going home at the end of each school day, carefully recopying by hand all the fiddly-faddle I had written in my calculator during geometry class, and then getting lost for hours in my writing. When I wasn't writing, I was reading the moldy copy of the Encyclopedia Britannica we had in the basement, perusing it for inspiration to create worlds for my characters to live in. Yeah, I should have been doing my homework. I had dozens, maybe even hundreds of notebooks filled up with my handwriting stacked up in my closet. And that, my friends, is how you go from being a great student to a mediocre student. It's how you start digging a hole in your backyard and burying your treasure by trying to hide what you love, making what geeks you out into a shameful little secret that you literally hide in your closet. But I digress. To pull out a few threads from my jumble of that memory, writing was my passion, imagination was my playground. Complicated connecting storylines gave me hope. Character development made me feel powerful. World building made me feel so freaking smart. Those are my 3 memories. Now look at yours. Describe your 3 most vivid memories in as much detail as you can. I'm talking like at least one big blank sheet of paper for each. As you describe those good memories, what do they evoke for you? Not in the specific sense. I mean, I would never go around saying that a TI-82 calculator brought me any particular joy. It is for what the calculator allowed me to do that I remembered it at all. I would never say that I have a particular fondness for singing Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, but I do love singing with other people, and particularly with people I know well and have tremendous respect for as musicians and performers. As a socially functional introvert, but who suffers from debilitating social anxiety, this memory of being in a huddle should make me cringe. Instead, I feel so safe and loved and important in that memory. Although I was just a child, I was on a team. I was an equal stakeholder with adults on a team that accomplished something. Something small, yeah, like being in the chorus of a community theater production of Hans Christian Andersen, but something that felt big to me at the time. It's that teamwork. It's being an equal stakeholder with people I deem credible. That's what I want to retain from that memory. So, what are your memories? What words are you using to describe them? I've told you before, I'm a knitter. Many, many years ago, I was knitting peacefully on the couch at my in-laws' house in the south of France, as one does, when, unbeknownst to me, my niece, who was probably 5 at the time, she got her hands on a skein of yarn. She pulled and pulled and pulled and pulled until nothing was left of it but a gigantic mess of yarn. Oh, I nearly threw the whole thing away. But my father-in-law, bless his heart, he sat down with the patience of a saint, found the end, and carefully wound back up the yarn into a ball. I want you to go digging for that loose end, just like my saintly father-in-law did. Find the loose end of that jumbled mess and start pulling. Pull gently. Interrogate that little piece you've managed to loosen up. Be curious about yourself. Curiosity is a virtue. That was the Philosopher Princess again. I hope she's not waking up. You'll see. It's a really good thing she's still asleep. Do you understand what we're trying to do here? Do you understand the importance of this exercise? We are trying to name the things that have brought you joy in the past. And then, very, very carefully, we're going to start looking for ways to bring those things back into your life in tiny little doses, one speck of fairy dust at a time.
Alors on chante, on danse. danse, on fait la fête, comme au ciel, on chante.
The philosopher princess's ears must be burning today because I am going to mention one of the virtues she loves to drone on about. If I'm not careful, I might prematurely wake her up. So here goes. Come closer. I'm going to whisper it in your ear. Lucidity. Lucidity. The ability to think clearly, especially in intervals between periods of confusion or insanity. I mentioned in a previous episode my smoking hot grandma Gigi. Just to catch you up, if you don't remember, or gasp if you haven't listened to the earlier episodes yet, Gigi was my paternal grandmother. Gigi was a beautiful, intelligent, devilishly funny woman, although not always intentionally funny. She was something of a narcissist, which made her rather difficult for everyone to live with. Gigi was beautiful and she knew it. And this was something that she cultivated until the day she died at the age of 94. Gigi wore heels until she was in her 90s. I remember even in her late 80s, she wore these heeled sandals and always in bright colors, hot pink, red. Gigi did not believe in neutral colors. For example, I can't remember Gigi not having perfectly manicured nails. She had this Lee press-ons period. Oh, now that's a funny story, but I'm going to save it for another day. All right. Hours before Gigi passed peacefully in her sleep, she had a manicure. That woman knew how to make an entrance. Her entrance into heaven, in this case. My mother tells a story of when she and my father were first married. My father was something of an athlete, and he liked to take an early morning run. Gigi was visiting them from Florida at the time, and she asked if she could join him. So apparently, Gigi was wearing pedal pushers, sky-high stilettos, and chain-smoking Virginia Slims from a cigarette holder. Sure, why not, my father told her. As my mother tells it, she watched the two of them leave, Gigi toddling down the street from telephone pole to telephone pole in her sky-high heels, stopping at each telephone pole to take a deep drag on her cigarette. You can't make this stuff up. Or there was the day that Gigi met my indulgent husband, who, may I remind you, is French. She hadn't been able to come to our wedding, and we finally made a trip to visit the family in Florida a few months later. Gigi tended to believe that every pair of eyes in every single room was laser focused on her. She had a bawdy sense of humor that embarrassed all of us, pretty much all the time. That first time she met my French husband, all the family was there. That is, my cousins, each one more beautiful than the last, their husbands, each one more charming than the last. There was my sister, my aunt, my uncle. When Gigi greeted my husband, she leaned in to do what the French call les bises. That's when you give each other a kiss on each cheek in front of everyone. Everyone. Gigi very loudly said, and really with only a touch of tease, "Now, you dirty man!" She turned to everyone else in the room and said in a faux scandalized voice, "He tried to French kiss me." Mortified, my cousins and my aunt and my sister, we had no idea how to respond. But the good news was that for my husband, a French kiss is just a kiss. So the awkwardness of that moment passed right over his head. You see, Gigi, she was Gigi. So, why are we talking about Gigi when at the beginning of this section I was talking about lucidity? Well, now I want to get to the story that I really wanted to tell you. One time, my two gorgeous cousins took Gigi, at the time she was nearing 90, to Denny's for breakfast. That was her favorite place to go. Keep in mind, my cousins are like Miss America, kind of all perfect, all-American beauty. I will pass over the fact that Gigi overshot the driveway for Denny's, so she ended up driving her little white sports car along the sidewalk to get into the parking lot, eliciting a very unhappy reaction from a man in a pickup truck who gave her the finger, who she swore up and down was only trying to hit on her. Gigi sat between these two beautiful women. Their server was a young man who probably was just doing his job and being friendly, but at one point, she whispered to my cousins, "I really wish he would stop flirting with me." Yeah, you see, Gigi had a tiny bit of a lucidity problem. Gigi's inflated idea of her importance, of her beauty, and her desirability was, I think we can agree, misplaced for someone pushing 90 sitting between two all-American beauty queens. When I tell you that we need to be lucid about our hopes for rediscovering our sparkle, I want to warn you. If you used to love to hike, but buried that pleasure for whatever reason, Don't go expecting that you'll be hiking Kilimanjaro next week. Your passion for drawing, the one you gave up because it was just a hobby that got in the way of more serious, more important endeavors, well, digging that up and dusting it off, starting to draw again, will not mean that you'll have an exhibit at the Louvre. Maybe the local library, but we need to be lucid. It's not because I used to perform in community theater that I will ever make it on Broadway, and it's not because I used to write college-lying notebooks full of stories that I will ever publish a bestseller. Remember, when we do our ideal life exercise, one of the goals is to give active, enthusiastic consent to where we are now, to our current circumstances. And at the same time, we're going to be digging up the treasures we hid all those years ago and finding a way, at our current scale, to start investing those treasures. Let's be lucid. Don't pull a Gigi on me, all right? You promise? Gigi loved attention. She loved to hear that she was beautiful. She loved to hear that she was funny. She needed the input of others to feel loved. She was a bottomless pit. The problem with always needing someone else to recognize you and to validate you is that no one else knows what you really need. Real quickly, because I'm sure you've heard about this concept before, and I don't want to trample on the toes who will talk about it much, 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 much better than I ever could. There's this idea of the 5 love languages. It's a notion that was developed by a psychologist as a way of describing how we experience and how we express love. There are 5 of them. There is touch. There is words of affirmation. There is giving gifts. There is spending time. And there is acts of service. Even if you've never heard of this before, which I highly doubt, I think you could agree that there's something to the idea that we might express love and experience love differently. For example, I desperately need physical affection to know that I'm loved, but I do not easily give physical affection to others. I love to give meaningful little gifts to the people I love to express my love. My indulgent husband, on the other hand, he both shows and experiences love through acts of service. One of our children is like me. He experiences love through touch. The other's like Gigi. He is a bottomless pit, needing constant affirmation. The work of relationships, and particularly family ones, is to learn how to speak each other's love languages. Not everyone has the emotional bandwidth to take on this project. One of the highest priorities that I have in my family is to become a student of my husband and my children, to know how to show them love so that they feel it. I fail. I fail a lot. Because, I'm going to be honest, I don't speak acts of service very well. And I am not a spending quality time kind of gal. I am love language level 1 on all of these things. But I've decided to learn those languages. Now, there is one person in my family that I have ignored when it comes to learning my own love language. Do you know who that is? It's myself. I bet you are in exactly the same boat. I want us to try something. Valentine's Day is coming up, February 14th. I want you to think about your love language. I want you to think about how you experience love. And I want you to be your own Valentine. I want us to be our own Valentines, our own intentional Valentines. Make yourself your own homemade Valentine. Write yourself a letter full of meaningful affirmations about yourself. Buy yourself something small, thoughtful, meaningful. Plan a tea party for yourself. Get dressed up, make cupcakes, and eat bonbons, and take lots of selfies while you do it. I have an idea. I want to make you a deal. I want you to do this. And me, I want you to do this so much that I'm going to get some skin in the game. I want you to send me a voice message to my email with how you are going to celebrate Valentine's Day according to your love language. You're going to send that to, I'm going to give you my email right now, lily.fields.challenge@gmail.com. That's Lily, Lily, .fields.challenge at gmail.com. I want you to say something like this, like, this Valentine's Day, I'm going to show myself love by something like that. Here's my promise. To the first 10 people who send me their answers, which I can then use in the podcast, I will send you a handmade Valentine, wherever you are in the world. On our Valentine's Day episode, I will share your responses. Is it a deal, Cinderella? Now, I want to introduce you to someone. Her name is, well, let's call her Tallulah Rose. I met her on a park bench in Wonderland, and I want you to hear what she had to say to me.
In my ideal life, I feel my feelings and let them go. In my ideal life, I make time to create art, and I am an artist. In my ideal life, I communicate my sexual needs with clarity. In my ideal life, I do not apologize for things that I am not responsible for.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that clear? Don't you love the words she put on her ideal life exercise? Thank you, Tallulah Rose. That's how you do it. Good job, darling. I am so proud of you. It's hard work. What we are doing here is hard work. It's hard work learning to believe in ourselves again. It is hard work remembering the passions we used to have, and remembering can dislodge a lot of feelings. Give yourself a lot of grace and a lot of space. Let wisdom speak to you in those quiet moments of the morning. I want you to keep doing it, even though it's hard. Do it because it is hard. Don't stop. Keep digging. Keep dusting off. You are not done sparkling yet. As a matter of fact, from all that stomping you were doing earlier, it sounded to me like you are getting ready to sing with your feet. Just a bit of housekeeping before I sign off. I want to thank those of you who have left reviews on Apple Podcasts. Those really do help people find the show. And just to toot my own horn for a minute here, I want to read one of those reviews to you. The title of the review says, "Sounds magical." Seriously, I love you. Then it says, "Lily is the fairy godmother you didn't know you needed." I will confess I cried real tears when I read that, so thank you. That said, let's be honest. You knew you needed a fairy godmother. You just didn't know where to find one. Which is why I am going to ask you to rate and review the podcast on your podcast service. And even more, share it with someone who you think might need a fairy godmother. You can share the podcast or the episode directly from the podcast app, or you can look for my channel on YouTube. It's just Lily Fields, and I'll put that in the show notes. On that YouTube channel, you'll find the full episodes in a playlist, but also something that I'm calling a little fairy dust. Those are little highlights of each episode. You can find those and share those too. I'm on Instagram and Facebook as @lily.fields.challenge. You can also follow the show on Instagram and Facebook at Sing With Your Feet, lowercase, no spaces, no punctuation. I want to thank Jonathan Moulin and the crew over at 7 Production here in Mulhouse, France for the use of the song La Joie for the intro and outro to the show. Also to Matt Kugler who sang it and Claude Eque who wrote it. You guys really do always bring La Joie. Well, this is your fairy godmother signing off. I just want to remind you, it is never too late to start singing with your feet.